Read the passage, then answer the questions that follow. 3D Printing, Make Mine a Mollusk by Russell Garwood, The Conversation. When you think 3D, you probably imagine the cinema and popcorn. What you probably don't think, unless you're a particular breed of paleontologist, is mollusks, and certainly not printing them out in 3D. But this practice, strange as it seems, is becoming increasingly common, with some startling applications. A recent study by University of Texas researcher Jacob Vinther and colleagues is a wonderful example of the high-tech tools many modern paleontologists use to understand fossils. This study on a primitive group of mollusks employs a number of different techniques: traditional observation, high-resolution CT scanning, computer reconstruction, and DNA-based dating methods to better understand the evolutionary relationships and biology of this fossil group, and yes, some 3D printing. The animals. Vinther and colleagues describe a new species in an extinct group called the multiplacophorans. These are mollusks, a larger group that includes mussels, squids, and snails, which had a shell on their back split into 17 plates. These plates sat on the soft parts of the animal, a thick, leathery mantle, which had many smaller hard plates or spines embedded around the edge. The fossil used by Vinther and the team is a 390 million-year-old specimen from Ohio. The researchers used the anatomy of the creature, combined with DNA-based dating, to suggest the fossil and the group to which it belongs is most closely related to a living group called the Chitons, or Polyplacophorans, but is not a true member of that group. From this, they surmise some of the similarities between the groups must have evolved separately. They're an example of convergent evolution, when similar selective pressures result in animals independently evolving similar traits. One of the tools the author used to understand these creatures and reach these results is X-ray microtomography, a high-resolution form of CT scanning. The technique. UCT is a powerful and increasingly mainstream tool employed by paleontologists to study 3D fossils. While the majority of fossils aren't preserved in 3D, those that are can often prove difficult to study. Bits of the animal can remain buried in the rock. UCT is a non-destructive X-ray-based technique that helps overcome such limitations. By taking a large number of X-rays or projections of a specimen as it rotates, UCT can create a series of slices, or a 3D volume, which maps the interactions between different materials and X-rays. This allows a digital 3D model to be created. The mollusk fossil studied by Vinther and the colleagues wasn't perfectly formed. When the creature died and rotted, its plates separated, leaving a disjointed fossil. After creating a 3D digital model, including portions of the plates which were buried in a rock, they used software to reassemble the disarticulated fossil. And that's not all. The reconstruction. Vinther and colleagues made further moves to understand the long-dead creature by creating a physical reconstruction. First, they used a 3D printer to create a physical representation of the digital model. UCT. The Greek symbol U, pronounced mu, is often used as an abbreviation for micro in scientific writing. This piece of kit is a machine that takes the digital files that record the fossil's 3D anatomy and uses them to build a solid model of the organism. This technique comes in many flavors, but the type paleontologists use usually involves plastics or resins, either liquid or powder in form. The material is then fused to create a solid object in the correct shape, most commonly using lasers. The end product is a physical 3D model, in this case a reassembled multiplacophoran, 12 times larger than the original. The final stage of this process was to create a realistic recreation of the animal in life, which was done by hand with clay, plastic, and lots of paints. The future. In the last decade, paleontologists have been applying X-ray techniques and other methods mentioned above to a wide range of creatures, from the tiniest, earliest preserved living animals to more recent and far larger dinosaurs. Clearly, using techniques can help us better understand fossils. Through resolving their anatomy in full, helping us recover body parts from the rock, and sometimes even allowing us to see their internal organs, the methods now being mastered are giving us a clearer picture of extinct animals' biology. As the study by Vinther and colleagues admirably shows, we can also gain a clearer picture of those creatures' evolutionary relationships, and we can see long-dead organisms in almost as much detail as if they were alive today. The following question has two parts. First answer part A, then answer part B. Number 1, part A. Which sentence states the two main ideas in the passage? A, new inventions are impressive and they are helping us learn more about the past. B, mollusks have changed relatively little over millions of years, but they provide an example of convergent evolution. C, Jacob Vinther is a researcher at the University of Texas and he works with a group of fellow researchers. D, the final stage of making a 3D model is completed by hand, and this involves clay, plastic, and paint. Part B. Select two sentences from the passage that support the answer in Part A. A recent study by University of Texas researcher Jacob Vinther and colleagues is a wonderful example of the high-tech tools many modern paleontologists use to understand fossils. B, Vinther and colleagues describe a new species in an extinct group called the Multiplicophorans. C, while the majority of fossils aren't preserved in 3D, those that are can often prove difficult to study. Bits of the animal can remain buried in the rock. D, the final stage of this process was to create a realistic recreation of the animal in life, which was done by hand with clay, plastic, and lots of paint. E, as the study by Vinther and colleagues admirably shows, we can also gain a clearer picture of those creatures' evolutionary relationships. Number 2, according to the passage, how has technology influenced the work of paleontologists? A, it has allowed them to discover new fossils much more quickly. B, it has allowed them to turn every fossil that has ever been discovered into a 3D model. C, it has allowed them to gain a clearer picture of evolutionary relationships. D, it has allowed them to scan fossils without having to dig them up.